Hi everyone. I am making this video to discuss the final exam. The final exam is due on Monday at the end of week 7.5. So the due date for that would be December 21st. And I wanted to just take some time to go through the final so it could maybe alleviate some stress if you can understand exactly what I'm looking for. So instead of just doing a video with my face, I thought it might help to actually look at the instructions together and walk through it. So the final exam is a letter that you are going to be drafting to Mrs. Henderson. Now the exam is assuming that you're back kind of in the beginning. Like we're going back in time here. So we are assuming that Mrs. Henderson had just come in to your office and explained the facts of her situation, and she's asking you to explain what she has ahead of her. Now, we know what she has ahead of her because, we had this entire class and we've been working on it all session, but we're assuming that she does not know that because we're, kind of going back in time here. So we are going to draft a letter to her explaining what she can expect from this lawsuit that she's thinking about bringing against Office Mart. So again, right back to the beginning, before you even had any documents, before she'd received any documents from you, before anything had happened, she had just come into the office and explained her case, and now she left, and you are going to write out in a letter what she should expect. And so this is the information that you need to include. So you would start with explaining the steps for initiating the civil lawsuit. So again, this is the final exam. So we want you to kind of go back and reflect on everything we did in the course. So this would bring you back to the week where we discuss pleadings and complaints and answers. And you are going to explain in a few paragraphs about pleadings and complaints answers. And keep in mind, this is very different than anything we've done before because now we're writing to a client. In the past, we've written to the court and we've written to the supervising attorney, but we have not written a letter or anything directly to the client. So it's important to understand that your tone would be different. Of course, your tone would be professional, but you have to assume that the client does not know legal terminology, does not maybe understand things the way you do because she has never been to law school, she has never taken paralegal classes, she's never worked in a law firm. So you kind of have to assume that she might not even know what a pleading is. So kind of, really explain it to her like you would explain it to a family member who wasn't familiar with the information that you're gathering. So start with that. After that, you want to explain and identify the relief that could be available to Mrs. Henderson. And we know what this is. This is damages because she got hurt. So explain, the type of damages she could possibly get. And you can go back to the fact pattern for that information. Okay, next you want to outline and explain the procedure governing how the case will progress through the court system. And again, this is the final exam, so we're trying to get you to go back and work through exactly what will happen. You filed the pleadings. Well, then what did we do next after the pleadings? It was some pretrial work, such as discovery. And so we want to go through all of the discovery, different demands that she would be asking for, what might the other side ask of her. Just kind of go through the whole thing, explaining types of discovery and the information that would be in that discovery. Next, you're going to explain the information regarding the trial that might occur and what would happen if she was not successful. So in this section, I envision you talking about possible motions that the other side would file, different issues that can happen. For example, from the fact pattern that the defendant files a motion for summary judgment. So you probably would explain to her that that could be an issue, and what would you do to argue against that motion for summary judgment. Also, we know, hindsight is 2020. We know that we had to do a motion to compel. So maybe you would want to lay that out for her that, you know, it's possible you would ask for documents and the other side maybe won't give them to us, so we'd have to get the court involved. So basically going through all possible things that could happen, different motions that could be filed, different things that could come up during the trial. This is where you'd go back to the weeks where we discussed motions and trial and kind of lay out for her what could happen. The lecture materials can be very useful to you as you discuss this section. And then similarly, what we're discussing this week, which is possibilities of appealing, those lecture materials would be helpful as well. If you can add a paragraph or two explaining that if she does lose and she chooses to appeal, how that would work. Okay, and then the next bullet here talks about alternative dispute resolution, and we worked on that in week 6, so I'd go back to those lecture materials, explain maybe it doesn't make sense to go to trial, explain reasons why it might make more sense to try to resolve this outside of court, and explain those different options. We specifically addressed arbitration and mediation, so I would expect a couple of paragraphs explaining those alternatives. And then finally, this is just not as much a separate section, but as you go along, as I said earlier, assume that Mrs. Henderson does not have any prior legal knowledge and that she's unfamiliar with all of this. So you want to be very careful to explain your legal terminology, explain every part of the pre-trial, the trial, and the post-trial in such a way that a non-legal person would understand. Clearly, you want your tone to still be professional, but you might have to simplify it a bit given she doesn't have the background that we do. Okay, and so you know from being in my class this whole session that I love, love, love headings, especially in this memo. This memo has a lot of information in it, so much. So headings are huge. So as you can see here, we give you a list of possible headings. You don't have to use these exact headings, but I would suggest that maybe you do, because then you would ensure that you have all the information that I'm looking for. It'll keep it organized, and it will really help your reader as they go through the it'll really help your reader, excuse me, as they go through the memo to be able to find the information they want quickly. So again, your reader is Mrs. Henderson, that's your audience, and so if she wants to quickly look to see what her possible available relief is, she can just look for that heading and find that information. So that is very important to do that. Obviously, in the legal world, if we don't cite things, then it doesn't have as much backing behind it. So you always want to cite information as you go through. We're looking for at least 3 sources here. And these could be, you can use sources that were in the lecture materials. You can use other sources that you have. Anytime you maybe were drafting any of these items throughout the course, if you had done any additional research to help you, you can cite to those. All the supplemental resources that I've given you throughout the course, if those help at all, you can cite to those. So just basically any idea that you have that you're basing it on something you've read, you should always cite to it. So I hope this helps you, and I really do hope that this brings together the whole course. I feel like my idea here is to have it all kind of wrapped up neatly so you can remember everything we learned, and you always can see how much you know by trying to explain it to someone else. So that's the idea behind this project. By explaining it to Mrs. Henderson, you're kind of testing how much you know. And again, of course, there's a rubric here, so always look at the rubric before submitting a document. So I really do hope this helps. I'm sorry this video ended up being so long, but I hope it was full of some good information. Thank you.